Another great example how you can decide that your microphone is bad or not clear enough, or you can even go wrong buying something like really exaggerated or jumping out of the mix microphone with too much of 6K boost like typical modern microphones, just because of you, for example, put the wrong delay on a vocal. For example, you watch some videos of Chris Lord-Alge and Chris Lord-Alge said, okay, I'm gonna use a slap delay. Classic settings 166 milliseconds. You apply this slap delay on a vocal and it sounds like more space in the sound, vocal a little bit more complicated and doesn't sound that alone in the mix. But for example, you use a little bit of feedback. What is feedback? It's how many times it's gonna repeat after your word. For example, you sing something and you say word 2. What it means? It means slap delay gonna repeat this word, but it's only 166 milliseconds. It means it's gonna be like 2. It's not even 2. It's like 2. So it's super fast. And just imagine you have feedback. Your feedback will make your word 2 like 2. And every word will be like this. You will have so dirty vocal and you will be blaming your microphone. And instead of properly set up slap delay, you're gonna blame your microphone, you're gonna use some super bright microphone which doesn't sit in the mix, just because of it sounds clearer with this shitty sounding slap delay. I hope you feel what I say. I mean knowledge over equipment. Another example. For example, a lot of people nowadays say something like 3D sounding instruments. For example, you record two guitars, one to the left speaker, another one to the right speaker, right? Like stereo overdub guitars. You want to have more 3D sound. What you should do? A lot of people typically put just a reverb. But reverb doesn't give you further sounding instrument, deeper sounding instrument. If you want deeper sounding instruments in the mix, you should consider panorama, because the wider your stereo sound, the closer to the listener it sounds. It's a physics rule. Just imagine like 10 people like this in front of you. And go back 200 meters back. How it will be for you after you go back? Like a point in the center. So this is how our brain works, because when you hear some stereo sound pretty close, it's always wide. When something sounding pretty far away, it's always closer to the center. So how to achieve deeper sounding instruments? It's not just only putting some reverb on your plugin, on your instrument. It's more about kind of considering panorama. It has something to do with equalizer, and we also cover it on the course. When we learn a reverb topic, we even learn early reflections, how they stay to each other. For example, balance between early reflections and tail relates to feeling how far away this instrument sounds. So it's kind of really deep and advanced level of audio engineering. Nowadays, a lot of people just really don't know a lot of things, and they found a way how to explain it. They say, okay, it's pretty controversial. They say, okay, different opinions, different tastes. No, in audio actually everything depends on some rules, depends on some physics rules. Definitely if you know all this stuff, you really can do a lot of things. Not some random result, but you really can craft your mix in the way like you want, if you really understand every part. The same like, you know, in Middle Ages people were looking at stars and praying for some let it rain, and it rains. Nowadays when we have technology and people start to understand how to predict the weather, you can predict it. The same in mixing. Don't be that guy from Middle Ages. Learn it, it's really possible to really manage your mix in the way you want. Another super important example, and this mistake definitely almost in every my students mix, of course after a while they start to fix it and start to understand what it means, but initially typically it's like this: nobody controls sibilances. Vocals have so loud a sound, and it always doesn't sit in the mix. Let me show you graphically what I mean. Let's imagine red color, it's our level of music. Let's say it's like pretty flat volume of your music, and your vocal it's like this. After you even compress it, it sounds like every word's pretty evened out and S sound jumping out, kind of louder. Just because of it's somewhere around 6K, 7K, 8K. Typically it's really sensitive for our ears and it sounds really present, much more present than other words. And you don't control it. And it will be like this. Eventually it will be like this. You will try to put a vocal on the right volume. Probably your vocal will be sitting in the mix like this. Some words will be drowning in the mix and S sounds, sibilances will be jumping out of the mix. But you lower it to prevent this kind of jumping out sounds of your vocal from the music. So let's say in terms of S sounds, sibilances will be sounding right, but in terms of other words it will be pretty bad. Other words like a, o, u will be drowning in the mix. Instead, for example, you can put this vocal to get every other word higher than music just a little bit. Like a, o, u, pretty pronounced right now, pretty loud, but not too much sitting in the mix. But at the same time, when sibilances happen over here, they will be too loud comparing to the volume of music. That's why your vocal will never be sitting in the mix. So that's why it's super important to control your sibilances before you put vocal in the music. Another example, when you try to align your vocals, and it can be like residual compression. Residual compression is pretty bad problem. It probably gets like an hour to explain. Simply speaking, if you use too long releases, your compressor will not be stopped working when next word appears. And compressor gonna sum amount of compression from the previous note and amount of compression that should be applied for the next note. So it's gonna be not the right amount of compression. It's gonna be more compression for the next note just because of compressor didn't stop working on the previous note when the next note appeared. You know, so it's called residual compression, and when your release time so long, your notes can be pretty bad evened out, and vocal always gonna be like louder, quieter, and in the mix it will be sitting pretty badly. Another great example, how you consider harmonics. Harmonics can be really different. Harmonic content. You should understand one trick that people really don't understand nowadays. I call it enough coloration. For example, if you like really colorful sounding microphones and really colorful preamplifiers, you should record in this way. You will have already pretty colored sound, and then you should choose some less colorful equalizers, less colorful compressors. Don't put too much additional harmonics to your already existing harmonic content, and it will be sounding the same tasteful, colorful and great. A lot of people do opposite. They buy really expensive and cool sounding microphones and preamp, and then they randomly put some equalizers, colorful compressors, and when you blend a lot of coloration plus a lot of coloration, it's too much. It sounds like dirt. And people say, oh my god, what preamp I bought, it's super bad. Or opposite, sometimes people buy some preamp, clear type of preamp like this one, for example, super analog, and they put clear sounding EQs and compressors on it, and it sounds still pretty sterile. Maybe not sterile, but you know, like too clear. And they say, maybe I should buy some another preamplifier. But wait a second, you should consider how much harmonic you put in there. It can be really trained, because recently I taught even myself to really hear harmonic content. It takes a lot of years, but eventually you really start to hear kind of form of sound, you know. So it's absolutely vital to consider your coloration. We have coloration topic. Another example, when you play in the game, I'm gonna emulate analog bass. For example, you know, when you work on real console, if you go higher than 0 dBVU, you start to compress a little bit, like natural type of gentle compression to your sound. Also, you put more saturation, and the higher you go, the more overdrive you get. In this case, you should understand, sometimes people just randomly put some plugin with this emulation, and then they complain something like, okay, it doesn't sound certain, I don't have punch, it doesn't sound clear, and it doesn't cut through the mix. But wait a second, you put too high level through your analog bass. You killed your transients. You compressed those transients. So that's why you don't have clarity. All these little tricks and nuances we cover during our course. Another cool example, it's a parallel compression. Because when you put parallel compression on your drum group, for example, it typically sounds just louder, and you say, okay, it sounds better, just because of it's louder. Just imagine drums and drums plus something additional. So it will be louder. That's why typically you say, oh my god, it sounds better. I already explained this trick, by the way, you definitely should check it, it's called drum mixing. On my channel, find this video, it's called drum mixing. In there I show that trick how to really achieve punchy drums. Instead of putting your parallel compressor on the whole drums, I'm gonna explain how to achieve better sound. There is so-called residual compression that really a lot of people don't understand. What is residual compression? For example, the idea of making more kind of click for your drums, it's using like longer attack on your parallel compressor. In this way you kind of allow transients to pass through and then you squeeze your tail. Then you blend your original drums and this click from compressed signal and you achieve kind of punchy drum. But because of release, your compressor will not be stopped working before the next hit. For example, your compressor working on a kick, and next hit it's a snare, and next hit will be a snare, and your transient of a snare, of a next snare, will be squeezed just because of your compressor hasn't stopped working. That's why you never achieve super punchy drums. So in that video I explain how to manage it. And just imagine you record your drums by yourself. You will be blaming your microphones, your recording techniques, instead of just understanding how to mix it properly. So can be super valuable technique. Check that video as well. But you know, it will not be even 1% of knowledge we cover on our course. If you really feel what I mean, check this course, it can be just game-changing thing for you. Great example, it's a phase. We have this topic called phase. For example, you're recording your bass guitar with a VI track and a microphone which is put in front of amplifier. No matter what you're gonna do with your EQs, you will have phase issues if you don't align phases. So one sound will be killing the other sound. That's why they will never gonna be working together. So, but at the same time, it's not like flipping phase or just finding right timing for the second microphone, for the second track. So, for example, a lot of people cut 2K on electric guitars because a lot of people nowadays on the internet do the same. But wait a second, did you notice every time when you do it, your guitar loses its articulation? Because actually resonant peak of your pickup on your electric guitar definitely has a resonant peak somewhere around this range. So when you cut it, you typically lose articulation, like clarity of your guitar sound. And then you complain, okay, my guitar is not so good, it's not articulated. Why you cut 2K? Typically just because of its annoying or sharp sounding. But cook your guitar sound before you go to EQ stage. Typically it has something to do with equalizer on your guitar amplifier. It has something to do with your guitar. If you're really not happy with your sound of a guitar, it's a question of recording this guitar. It's not about kind of cutting 2K all the time, because this type of guitar definitely sounds like dark, too muddy, like unclear all the time. And in this case, people sometimes can say, okay, my guitar is pretty bad, or I don't like my pickup. They buy some pickup with higher resonant peak, like PAF pickup with 2.7 kHz, and still cutting 2K, it will be like different frequencies, and that's why your pickup will be more pronounced. And they say, okay, I found better pickup. But maybe your pickup was right, maybe you shouldn't have cut 2K all the time. If you don't like 2K, maybe you should set up your guitar amplifier more correctly, you know? Maybe you should consider what kind of plectrum strings you use, or what kind of electronics or settings on electronics of your guitar you use. In this case, it's more important how you record. Believe me, Chris Lord LG doesn't cut 2K on electric guitars, and his electric guitar is just awesome, much more open and certain than typically you can find on the internet in some videos on mixing or something like that. So definitely consider it a little bit more outside the box. Also, a lot of people boost in high frequencies using high shelves. A lot of people don't realize that high shelf in different EQs can be different. So it means every shelf can be different, and some shelves, for example in SSL EQs, when you boost 10K, you actually boost 8K, 6K, 5K, even 3K, because it's really slow moving shelf. So when you boost highs, you should understand what you boost. It's not only high frequencies, it's upper mid-range. And a lot of consequences can be just because of you boosted upper mid-range, as well as high frequencies. Also, what people really don't realize sometimes that compressor is an EQ. Every compressor tends to exaggerate some frequencies and hide other frequencies. What we do with our students on our course, we learn even how different compressors sound in terms of being an EQ. So our students know when to apply LA2A, when to apply a cell channel compressor, when to apply NIF 2264 or 33609, you know, just because of every compressor has some nuances, different frequencies exaggerated and all this stuff. So even before you start EQing, just controlling dynamics, you already can achieve more or less. We even have this homework. The goal is achieve more or less right sounding mix using only compressors. And I check how students manage to find right compressors in terms of what kind of frequency adjustments they provide. Also, what people typically don't do in mixing, when you boost high frequencies or upper mid-range, you never compensate the volume. You just boost it, but you should agree that your volume is increased. And it can be sitting worse in the mix, or too loud, or too annoying just because of louder volume, and you say, okay, it's a wrong movement. Every time that you do something with your sound, you always should keep the right volume in general for this instrument in the mix. It's super important habit that you should get. We check in all these things all the time. So what we typically do also with students, we always try to find right tools. In every situation you should find the right tool. You don't choose a compressor just because of some cool audio engineer uses the same compressor, or you don't use some techniques or something like that. You honestly have some idea and some approach how to do it. And you try a lot of different tools. For example, if it's EQing right now, you choose a lot of different EQs. It just kind of pushes you to a situation when you just find better tool, that right equalizer. That's why people who attend my course typically stand out from the crowd in quality, just because of they don't rely on some kind of cool techniques or ideas. They just honestly check what is the best tool for this exact instrument, and that's why it sounds awesome. You should understand, sometimes it's controversial, it's difficult to realize what's better, but I'm gonna push you until you really start to hear all this difference. The trick over here is there is no tricks. It's just a goal, idea how to do it, checking if it works, and finding how to do it. And it works in the final. Another pretty interesting example is how to check sharpness. Again, it relates to how you buy monitors, for example. It can be this situation. You mix, you boost a lot of upper mid-range, high frequencies, and all this stuff. But when you go to a car and listen to your music pretty loudly, or you try some headphones or something like that, it sounds really sharp. And you start to blame your monitors because your monitors don't show you sharpness of your mixes. And you go and buy new monitors. And there is no guarantee newer monitors will be showing you sharpness. What is the trick we have? Instead of buying something, just crank it up. The louder you listen to your music, Fletcher Manson effect starts to work. It means that the louder you listen to, the brighter sound you hear. And in this way it just will be really sharp if it's sharp sounding. So instead of buying some newer monitors, just sometimes from time to time just boost volume for your monitors. In this way you can check your sharpness. That easy. Just crank your monitors. But again, you know, what I can say in this video. It's like 0.001% of the whole course. And what the most important, I don't check your project right now. I cannot show you your mistakes. I cannot check how your project sounds comparing to top sounding mixes. You know, so you should attend the course to be able to check it with me. But at the same time, you should understand it's really affordable.